I'll say this for him, he's consistent.
Well, he's been so consistent all year.
Not the taste, consistency.
Consistently, yes.
Consistency! Thanks, losers.
And we are back. Fantasy Football Consistency Show. Thanks for being a part of this. Really appreciate you, everybody listening in. As always, of course, we are part of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. If you haven't had a chance to go out and listen to some of the other guys, a lot of great podcasts, all kinds of different genres, whether you're in Standard League, PPR League, IDP, Dynasty, whatever, DFS stuff. All kinds of stuff out there. Make sure you listen to these guys. A lot of great shows on that network. As always, every week we are here doing the Fantasy Football Consistency Show, talking about the players who are consistent in your league or not in your league, but we're going to help you with your league, and we're going to reach out to you. And speaking of helping out, my buddy, our buddy, Colby Conway is helping us out this week because, well, Ron can't make it this week. A little bit of a scheduling issue, but Colby, always glad to have you on. How's it going? And what's happening down in North Carolina?
Yeah, nothing too much. I'm doing well. It was only 64 degrees today, so a lot of people had their long sleeve shirts on, and I've been used to about this mid 80s that we've had for a while now. So down to the 60s was a little bit of a change up for us. I know up there in the Northeast a little bit different. Perhaps maybe it's been a little colder. But all things are well down here.
Now you lived in PA for a long time, so you know how this works. It gets down to 55, and you're like, I might need a lag jacket. I'm still wearing my no coat and polo shirt, with my dress pants to work, and I'm like, it's a little nippy, but it'll be 65 by the time I come out of work, so I don't need a coat today. But the one morning I didn't pay attention, and it was like 43, and I got out of the car and I'm like, oh God. So luckily it's a short walk across the parking lot to work, but it was 70 when I came out at the end of the day. But this works up here in the northwest or the Midwest. Down there, 60, if it's 65 up here, we're still considering shorts. And down there, 65, they're going to bundle up like it's an Arctic snow blast. So I get it. So, all right. So this week, again, we're looking at week 6. A lot of good stuff going on. Before we get started, just want to throw a shout out to our good guys, our friends, David Ibrahim at Fantasy Go. It's fantasygo.com. And if you haven't been to Fantasy Go, let me tell you a little bit about it. It is a really awesome site. And what's super cool about it is you can hire Colby or I to be your fantasy expert. And you literally will let you inside your team, especially now. The key is if you're on Yahoo, if you got your fantasy league team on Yahoo, that makes it much easier. We can actually get in. We can literally see your waiver wire, your lineup, your bench. We can kind of look at your team, look at the rosters, and really get in there and kind of help you with your team. Now, I like David's interpretation. He calls Fantasy Go being the Uber of fantasy football, because you can basically hire us to kind of, quote, drive your team. And that's what we're here to do. So last week, David threw out an invitation for folks if they wanted to give it a shot, free try for a week. And guess what? One of you guys out there reached out to me. I really appreciate their divine intervention. He reached out, and I helped him to his first win of the week. We did some waiver wire moves together, restructured his team, and got him his first victory. So he said he's going to hire me every week for the rest of the year until, obviously, he's either out of the playoffs or in the playoffs. But we're going to get him into the playoffs, Colby. And I know you haven't had anybody reach out yet, but super cool. Really enjoyed, really nice, easy to use user interface. So if you have a chance, go out, fantasygo.com, check it out, hire Colby or I. We'll definitely help you improve your team, get you where you need to be so you can get the playoffs. So if you're struggling a little bit, tough decisions, we're there to help you out. So make sure you check that out. They have a chat room inside of it, so we can chat with your questions. Once you send a chat message, it actually will email me, and I can respond, so I know that it's not just sitting there being weighted. And you also do DFS stuff, and Colby, certainly he's the best with that because he does consistently cash you with Ron every Saturday as well. So, Colby, let's get started here. Some interesting stuff going on this week. There's a game tonight. We got the Chiefs and the Broncos. Not sure what to expect there. You never know with those games. It's kind of like the Browns Steelers or any interdivision game like that. Texans Colts, I'm sure. You know, one team can go in looking super awesome. The other team can look and, you know, all of a sudden becomes a very close game and maybe even an upset every once in a while. I'm not sure I'm going to predict a Denver upset, but, you know, Denver's defense is coming along. They got a hell of a defensive coordinator there, Vic, I forget how to, Fagiano, however you pronounce his name. But he's doing a great job, so we'll see how it is. How do you pronounce his last name? Colby?
For me, for the Thursday night slate, I'll let you know. I didn't actually do any props, which I feel like I shouldn't be saying that considering that we do the prop bet podcast at BigGuyFantasySports.com. But the only line I played, I did take Kansas City, given 3.5 to Denver. I'm worried that it seems like a trap because on paper, Kansas City is much more talented. I believe there is an ankle issue with Patrick Mahomes that we might not be getting the full story on. He's simply not moving around as much. That was evident in last week's loss to – oh, shoot. Who did Kansas City play last week?
Probably your team.
Yeah, that's right. The Houston Texans. They did win a very
I thought you were
game.
joking. Did you literally forget?
No. Believe me, I knew.
Okay.
I knew.
Okay.
Texans don't win big games with Bill O'Brien, but under GM Bill O'Brien, we have a chance.
Okay.
So we'll have to see here. But no, I took Kansas City given the points. But yeah, I hate these Thursday night games. I hate these games.
They have not been. Most of them have not been very good. But let's just hope that the referees do a decent job. How about that? Let's try not to make it look so obvious that we're throwing the game.
You're shooting too high for decent.
Yeah,
You're
I
shooting
know.
Too high.
So, somebody sent me a Twitter message, asked me if I tracked consistency for referees. I'm like, that's something we should look into. Maybe that would be a factor in some of these games. How consistent they are throwing flags. I'm sure if Vegas looks at it, I can almost guarantee it. All right, so let's get started. Let's take a look at the quarterback position, and no surprise to anybody, right at the top at 100% consistent is our guy, Patrick Mahomes. Probably the most surprising thing is that he's not first in total points. He's fourth. He keeps earning his clutch games, but instead of earning 25, 30, 35 points a week, he's doing 20, 19, 21. Now, that's earning him a clutch game because it's about 19 and a half that you got to get over. So he's getting at 20, 21, 22. He's had a couple of big games too, but definitely not putting up the massive points that we were expecting. But I think we also expected regression. And I think when we looked at his numbers this past year and in the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, I said even if he regressed 20%, he would still be right there with everybody else and still be one of the top quarterbacks. So, I think we had to expect it. And like you said, it's really an injury problem, I think. He's certainly not as mobile as he is normally. Teams are certainly coming after him and causing a problem. But he's got Tyreek back, so I think things will get back to normal. The ankle will heal, but it's probably also going to bother him. Ankle injuries are never one to just magically go away in a few days. So I feel like he'll be probably struggling. We just hope that it doesn't get so bad that he can't play, and that's what we're worried about. Because I don't even know who the backup is in Kansas City. Do you?
Actually, no.
No.
I don't.
So that may be a concern. We may have to look into that because, boy, you want to talk about destroying some fantasy owners. Man, you're going to hurt a lot of players if Mahomes goes down to Kansas City because it's not like they have, some golden boy sitting behind him. So, all right, so right at the top, 100% consistency. Matt Ryan is also up there, fifth in total points. And the top five is very, very tight. First is Russell Wilson at 173. He's 4 for 6, 67%. And fifth place is 164. So less than 10 points separate the top five. So, certainly not a surprise there. Then it starts dropping off pretty drastically. When you get down to 10th, Jameis Winston is 10th in total points. Would you expect that? That is surprising. And he's at 129, so 50-point difference from first to 10th, and only less than a 10-point between 1 and 5. So that shows you the drop-off once you get past that number 5 spot. Also at 83%, which is your next level of consistency. Here's the surprises. Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Tom Brady, Carson Wentz. Realistically, only one of those guys was probably drafted as a QB1 on most fantasy teams. Maybe some crazy dude did Kyler Murray. It could happen. But the other three, I don't think any of those guys went especially in a 12-team type league where it's not a 2-quarterback league. But are any of those guys more surprising than the other that you really did not expect to be up there?
For me, really, you could make a case for most of these guys. Honestly, for me, it's probably Tom Brady, just because we knew how much they wanted to run the football, but they're getting pass happy again. I don't know if it's because Sony Michel stinks or whatever really it is. But you can make a case for, everybody else. You looked at Lamar Jackson. Yeah, he stunk as a passer, but coming into this year, most people just wanted him for his rushing floor that he could provide. And same kind of with Dak. Dak had that nice explosion early on thanks to some cupcake defenses. Now he's struggled a little bit. Kyler Murray's finally starting to come on rushing, so that certainly helps as well as playing in a division where there's some pretty vulnerable pass defenses minus the San Francisco 49ers, who are, incredibly stingy. But yeah, for me, really, it's Tom Brady. I was in on Carson Wentz this season, so I was fine with that 83% consistency. But Tom Brady was really the only one of these five guys that was kind of like, yeah, I'm really not looking at these guys as going to be, one of my QBs.
All right, so bigger surprise, the fact that Tom Brady is at 83% or the fact that Josh Allen is at 80% in 4 out of 5 games?
For me, honestly, it's Tom Brady. It's just the thing with quarterbacks that can run. I really like Josh Allen coming into the season. Again, it could have been that rushing upside. And then again, coming into it, I just knew that at the very least, he has 2 games against Miami, 2 games against the Jets. So a quarter of his season is against soft pass defenses. And right there, and I figured he would take that next step forward. So honestly, I'm not too surprised by Allen being 80% consistent. All
right, last thing for the quarterbacks. Number 1 and number 3, Russell Wilson and your boy Deshaun Watson, only 67%. Not terrible, but they're right there with Phillip Rivers and Jared Goff at 67%. But, here's the thing about Wilson, and this was documented in the consistency guide. This was the first year in his last 4 that he actually earned more than 2 clutch games out of his first 5 of the season, and he earned 3. So he only won more, but he actually started off at 60%. So now he starts what normally is his string of about 10 straight. So we feel good about that. What are your thoughts? Give us your thought. I know there's nobody more invested in Deshaun Watson than you. Do you see him, the team, making a turn for the better? Are they starting to get things to gel a little bit, the offensive line? I know the run game seems to be doing well in Carlos Hyde, but is that hurting Deshaun Watson because they have a run game in Carlos Hyde?
Well, I'll start with this. So I'll go to Russell Wilson quick, and what he's doing is incredible. They're a run-happy team, and yet he's still putting up great numbers, and just watching him play is a treat, to say the least. Deshaun Watson, honestly, the run game has certainly helped. The offensive line improvements have definitely helped as well, but also there has just been a dedication to Watson getting the ball out quicker. And it's one of those things where he could have had the 5 best offensive linemen in football, but if you're still going to hold on to the ball forever, they're going to get to you eventually. He's doing a better job getting rid of the ball. Honestly, the run game and the added weapons has just kind of hurt the receivers. However, you could make a case. Will Fuller had that one big week that put him up to like 4th in points with one big week. But you watch some of those games. Fuller dropped 3 touchdowns last week. Hopkins has dropped a couple touchdowns this season, so they could easily be just fine. So, we're watching the NFL MVP on Sundays when Watson's playing. I think he has a legitimate shot to win the MVP this year, and you can trust him the rest of the way. He's going to be very consistent down the stretch.
All right. Let's move on to the running back position. I feel like of all of the four positions, the running back position's probably been the most stable from a consistency standpoint than the other four. Most of the studs that you expect to be near the top consistency-wise are there. The other positions, we can't say that. Just referring quickly back to the quarterback, like Aaron Rodgers and Baker Mayfield at 33% consistent. But running back-wise, there isn't too many guys who have fallen off outside of probably Joe Mixon. I think everybody else that was a high or was an RB1 or a high RB2 are pretty much doing what they need to do. Let's start at the top with the 100% consistence, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott. No surprise, I think, from either of the two. Probably a bigger surprise is Leonard Fournette at 6 for 6. He's 9th in total points. I said this to Ron last week. This guy's like a ticking bomb to me. I just, I don't have him in any team. And I keep thinking, when's he going to go off? When is going to be the explosion? Not from have a big fantasy, from a doing something stupid, because he always seems to. Whether it's, gets a bad attitude one week and, gets thrown out of a game or ejected for a week or, does something dumb off field. But it's almost too quiet, isn't it? What do you think about him?
I've been in on Fournette for quite some time now. I remember back in the Kings Classic in the auction draft, I went in on Fournette and Gurley as my two running backs. Thank God I hit on one of them because it's worked out. But the crazy thing with Fournette, 100% consistent. The dude has one touchdown on the year. You'd think he'd be having like a minor allergic reaction to the end zone because he's simply not getting there. But for a guy that can be 100% consistent with only one touchdown on the season, he's riding a crazy workload. As long as he doesn't get injured or does something of a more immature Fournette act that we've seen in the past, I mean, what's to say he doesn't go 100% consistent on the year? I don't think he will, but he is as good as they come right now.
Yeah, and I know he said in the offseason he was going to, his maturity was going to be up and he was going to be, a better player and a better team player and that kind of stuff. Maybe he is, but I don't know. It just scares me. But he probably will because I don't have him, and I'll draft him next year because I'm stupid, and then he'll do something dumb. Just seems to work that way. The other person that is at 100% consistent, and this was brought up today, I was on Adam Ronis' show, was the fact that James White is 5 for 5. Now, he missed one game due to an injury. But, he's only 24th in total points, but 5 for 5, putting up those 12 to 14 yards a week, or yards, 12 to 14 points a week. So, we talked about it there. I'll bring it up here as well. Is if James White is sitting out there, he won't be on the waiver wire. I guarantee it. But if you see him sitting on a team and he's like on somebody's bench and he's not being used, definitely go trade for him before somebody figures out about his consistency. Because right now his points aren't enough that he's jumping off the charts. So people are probably looking at him going, I could put him in, but I'll put in this receiver instead. Might be a good guy to pick up before it's too late. What are your thoughts on James White? I mean, it just seems like as long as Brady's there, this is his favorite guy.
Yep, and if these injuries keep hampering the New England wide receiving core, there's no reason not to continue throwing to James White. His rushing yards on the year, if you look at him, has a season high of 26 yards, and he has 2 games with 1 yard or less. So he's doing all of his work in the receiving game, which is totally fine, especially in a Tom Brady offense that's predicated on, just these quick, short passes. And again, Josh Gordon's battling multiple injuries, I believe is the tweet I saw today. Philip Dorsett's been hampered. Antonio Brown's not there anymore. Randy Moss isn't there. Tim Brown's not there. So receivers are a little thin out there, and White has double-digit fantasy points in every game he's played in this season. Yep.
So as we go down the 83 percentile, basically, again, no surprises here. Christian McCaffrey, Eckler, Chubb, Johnson, Kamara, Derrick Henry at 80%, Le'Veon Bell, Kerryon Johnson. So in that 80 percentile range, any big surprises to you that you're like, oh, Wow, I didn't expect him to be. I mean, I know Eckler's probably it, but of course he missed his last one, missed his first clutch game of the year because damn it, they brought in Melvin Gordon. Have totally screwed up this offense. Pisses me off. I said to Rodas today, I said, this offense was clicking perfectly fine without Melvin Gordon. Eckler was a machine. Keenan Allen was a machine. Now, they didn't have Hunter Henry then, but these guys are both putting up fantasy god points. And all of a sudden, Melvin Gordon comes in for 2 weeks, and they look like they don't even know what they're doing out there anymore. I think weren't they down like 21-0 to like Detroit or Denver or something a few weeks ago? I mean, they've just looked pathetic on offense since Gordon's come on board. But going back to my question, anybody on there that you go, I'm kind of surprised that that they're high consistency wise.
Yeah, for me, it's not necessarily the fact that he is 80%. It's more so that it seems like he hasn't been as good to get to 80%, and that's Kerryon Johnson. Mm-hmm. Look at some of those rushing yards. He's getting plenty of work. I mean, he had 26 carries the other week, 125 yards, so obviously that's good. But the week before was 20 for 36, 12 for 41. I mean, he's only topped 50 rushing yards once this season, yet he's 80% consistent, and he's never caught more than 2 passes in a game. Luckily, he does have a receiving touchdown and 2 rushing touchdowns, so the touchdowns have
touchdowns have saved him. There's no question. Yeah. I mean, you look, he has basically the same numbers as James White, 67 versus 65. They both played 5 games, and Johnson has 1 less clutch game. But, it's obvious that whatever he's not doing in whatever part of the game, he makes up for it with a touchdown, and that covers all of his faults. Like you said, it's if he's doing this well, this consistent, and not doing as great as we expect him, I would hope that he would start picking up and be more part of the game and, continue that consistency, but on a higher level points-wise. Let's move down the list. Interesting enough, the running backs drop off then kind of down to the 67% range. And we've got Aaron Jones, Chris Carson, Mark Ingram, James Conner, Devontae Freeman, Barkley and Tevin Coleman are in there at only 2 for 3, but still 67%. Of the guys in here, who do you see that you think may not be able to keep up this pace? My first guy is Aaron Jones. Not that Aaron Jones isn't a stud, but damn LaFleur, he won't let them just have Aaron Jones be the stud unless Jamal Williams is hurt. So you saw what happened last week. I know in the prop bets, I was all over Aaron Jones for the under for rushing yards because I knew damn well that LaFleur was going to screw things up and start sharing the carries again, and they did. Do you think that that's going to hurt Aaron Jones' consistency, or is there somebody else in there you think can't keep up at that pace?
Well, I mean, if I were a betting man, I mean, the easy pick here would be Darrell Williams, just because if McCoy's healthy, he's getting the lion's share of the work. But yeah, Jones is the other one that's interesting. There's some sort of love affair there with Jamal Williams, and at times he looks like an adequate runner. But I firmly believe Aaron Jones is far more talented. But You're right, Matt LaFleur, or whoever loves Jamal Williams, and he keeps playing. So of these guys, obviously the easy answer is Darrell Williams. But after that, I'm inclined to lean Aaron Jones as well.
I say, where do you see Darrell Williams at?
Yeah. Well, he's 2 for 3.
Oh, 2 for 3. Oh, yeah. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah. So I cheated a little bit, but I needed to get one right. So
I need to get one right. That's fine. All right. Looking down the rest of the list, anybody in there that surprises you being this low? Maybe start picking things up. I mean, Carlos Hyde certainly has picked things up. I said from the beginning of the year, if Carlos Hyde could have scored a touchdown in any of the first 3 games, he would have earned a clutch game in every one because he had like 90 yards rushing but didn't do anything else, so he only got 9 points, and so that he didn't go over the 11.5 or 11 that you need for a clutch game, but he was putting up 60, 70, 90 yards rushing yards. What are your thoughts on Carlos Hyde? He's went 2 for 2 last 2 games. Does he keep it up and become, maybe up in that 67% range here in the next few weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. They're just going to feed him the rock. They like Duke Johnson and what he can do and what he can provide, but when they need to move the chains, it's going to Carlos Hyde. So I certainly think he'll be consistent down the stretch. And I look down a little bit further. The only one that really just I'm really surprised by, and I know our good buddy, old pal Brad Evans will agree, but David Montgomery being 1 of 5 to start the year, they just need to commit to this guy. They need to stop with all this tomfoolery with these other guys and just give it to Montgomery. He's the most talented back, and I mean, he has a great matchup this week against New Orleans. I think you might see him mentioned in a couple articles over on BigGuyFantasySports.com here this weekend. That's a tease, as they call it in the business. But yeah, David Montgomery, 20%. I really can't believe that. I thought he'd be doing much better than this consistency-wise and just overall production.
Right. Well, one of the things I brought up, again, I hate to refer back to my little talk today with Adam Ronis on his show, but he brought up David Montgomery and he said, obviously his consistency is not there. Do you think it's going to get any better? And I said, not as long as Matt Nagy is still the coach and they're still running that same offense. I go, this is exactly what Matt Nagy did to Jordan Howard last year. Is he mixed up too many people, too many ins and outs, Tariq Cohen here, Montgomery there, mixing things up, putting in, Mike Davis occasionally. The offense has sucked. And it also starts with the quarterback who sucks. And this team just has no offense whatsoever. So, until Nagy can, kind of like with Matt LaFleur, with Aaron Jones, until they can recognize what they have in these players and let them be the bell cow back, it's not going to happen. But that's how they coach the game. That's how they think they need to do what they need to do to win. It worked great for Chicago last year, and they went 12-4. They looked like the team to beat. But the defense hasn't been as strong this year, and it's also hard for a defense to be strong when the offense is getting 3 and outs all the time because your quarterback sucks. And obviously they lost Trubisky for a few weeks due to injury, so that certainly didn't help. But he wasn't doing that much better when he was in anyway. This team, I think, is a hot mess, and somebody said I think I've had some questions about trading for Montgomery, like a Trey Lowe, and I said I don't unless Nagy changes his mind, it's not going to change things. It's not a question whether he's got the talent; it's a question whether the coach is going to let him run the team, or let him, be the bell cow back. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think that I'm going down the right path here, or do you think that I'm a little off?
No, I think there's merit to it in terms of like trading. Like, no one's doubting Montgomery's talent. Like, obviously, you agree he's definitely a talented guy, but I mean, in fantasy, it's not always the most talented guy that plays. We've seen it other times in New England. They've had very good backs, and yet they still use 18 different running backs.
Right.
You don't know. Other teams like Atlanta's had Julio Jones for, the past couple years, and then again, he gets 4 touchdowns a season, and, these other guys are catching touchdowns left and right. So, yeah, I mean, if you can get a good deal for Montgomery, I'm not opposed to going and getting him.
Right.
But I would be careful if you think if you're buying low on him because, the statistical production has been down, but the questions aren't with Montgomery. The questions are with that offensive scheme and head coach Matt Nagy.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to the wide receivers. This is real hot mess, and we'll talk about some of the guys, both that were wide receiver ones and where they're at consistency-wise, and how it's kind of all over the place. But we'll start at the top. There's really only one perfectly consistent guy, and the funny thing is that, while I certainly had him in my top 12, I was kind of down on him because the year before he was only 75% consistent, which doesn't sound terrible, but he ranked 15th last year in consistency. But Michael Thomas, second in total points, 100% consistent. And this is even with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback for the last few weeks. There's no question that Teddy loves Michael Thomas. He gets open. He catches the ball. He's doing everything he needs to do. Drew Brees is due back, I think, after their bye week in Week 9. I think that from what I've heard, that's still on schedule. So we expect that to happen, and we'll see if that continues, that consistency continues. But I always assume yes. Your thoughts on Michael Thomas? What you've seen? What you're expecting?
Yeah, I'm completely fine with Thomas the rest of the way. He just catches everything thrown his way. It's just he's Tyler Lockett-esque, or maybe Tyler Lockett is Michael Thomas-esque, in that if he gets 8 targets, he's damn well catching at least 7 of them.
Right.
But yeah, Thomas 100% consistent on the season. Don't forget Tyrell Williams' injury Also, he's 100%, and also Antonio Brown 100% on the year as well. So, in case we see Antonio Brown in the XFL or if he comes back to the NFL,
yeah, those stats don't carry forward consistency-wise. Sorry, man.
Right, but yeah, no, Thomas, I'm just fine with him. I wouldn't be surprised from here on out if he ends the year as the number one receiver and he's quarterback proof. It doesn't matter. He's that good.
Well, like you said, Tyrell Williams is 100% consistent. He's 4 for 4, hasn't played for a couple weeks. Doesn't look like he's going to play again this week. We'll see when he gets back on the shelf there and gets rolling. At the 83% spot, a lot of good names, a lot of surprising names. So let's. I'm going to go with the ones that I would expect it to be up there: Cooper Kupp, Adam Thielen, Tyler Lockett. That's it. Maybe you could say Chris Godwin. I know there were some Chris Godwin lovers. I wasn't as high on him. I certainly had him as a wide receiver too. He's certainly exceeding expectations, especially when you look at the fact that he's number one in total points, so that certainly exceeds all of the expectations. He's had some monster games, but he's been also very consistent. I think those guys we kind of expected to be in that upper echelon. Some of the surprises outside of Godwin, Cortland Sutton, 12th in total points, 83% consistent. No surprise here. I do have to pat ourselves on the back for this one. Larry Fitzgerald, 83% consistent, 16th in total points. Probably the two biggest surprises are DJ Moore, 83%, 21st in total points. And then at the 80% level, Terry McLaurin, rookie wide receiver, which hardly ever happens. And then also we got John Brown at 80% as well. In the 80% also is Kenny Galladay, Allen Robinson, Alshon Jeffries. A little bit surprising they're that high, but still not bad and still very, very effective. What are your thoughts on the guys in the 80% range?
Yeah, I was high on Moore coming in. Really, of these guys in the 83% range, the only ones I really wasn't in on was Cortland Sutton. He was one that I was worried because Joe Flacco's his quarterback, and that's all I have to say about that one. But I like John Brown, just considering that he was practically free in most drafts. And, when you're in on a quarterback of a team, in theory, you got to be in on at least one of the receivers more often than not. So I did like John Brown as a late-round pick. Wasn't quite sure if he'd be 80% consistent through the first couple weeks of the season. But, yeah, of these guys up here, the only one, like I said, I really didn't have any shares of or really went in on was Denver's Cortland Sutton. So that one is very surprising to me.
Definitely. Also, then just kind of squeezed in there at 75% because they've only played 4 games. Michael Gallup and T.Y. Hilton. Amari Cooper is at the 67. There's a lot of guys. But instead of focusing on everybody and going on the down list, let's kind of focus on the guys that are not near the top that we expected. I hate to say it, but we're going to start with your boy, D-Hop. 67% consistent. 15th in total points. I mean, here's a guy that went 2 straight seasons with 100% consistency and is only 67%. More surprising is the 15th in total points. Again, I think we won't beat a dead horse. You already said it. What some of the concerns have been, the drops, the problem with the line, Watson not holding the ball too long. So I don't want to delve into it, but with Fuller dropping those passes, and do you think D-Hop is going to get back to the consistency, or do you think that they'll continue to spread the ball around a little bit more, and keep kind of Hopkins down from a consistency standpoint as we go through the season? Or is their defense so bad that they're going to have to throw the ball to get in these games anyway?
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. He had that big start to the week. He should have had a touchdown last week, dropped the ball at the goal line. I don't know if he heard footsteps or what, but without delving into that one really too much. But, yeah, I think he'll be just fine moving forward. And part of that is Watson's got some things figured out right now, which I really do like. But in the coming weeks here, so he's got the Colts and their secondary's banged up. Then the Raiders, the Jalen Ramsey, less Jacksonville Jaguars, and Ramsey's the one who always covered Hopkins. And then they have a bye week so he can get healthy. And then you got Ravens, Colts, and then Patriots kind of stink. But it's okay. I think Hop will be just fine.
Yeah, okay. And I'm not worried either. I think, and all of these guys that are down there. So I'm just going to kind of read off the list of top players, wide receiver ones that aren't performing at the above 75% level, which we expect. Odell Beckham Jr., Juju Smith, Edelman, Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, who are both at 50%. Stephon Diggs are at 50%. Landry. I don't know if there's anybody. Well, I'm sure there is. Tyreek Hill is 50%, but that's because he only played 2 games. I mean, probably another big surprise is Robert Woods at only 33% is kind of a shock. But then the Rams' offense, especially passing offense, haven't been that great. So what are your thoughts on some of the guys down there? Do you see a turnaround for all of them? Or are there any that you kind of concerned that they may not get their consistency back to normal high levels that they used to have?
I think there's optimism for most of them. Just some of these guys here looking in the 67% range. I honestly, the one I think I'm really most worried about is Juju, only because, Devlin Duck Hodges and, Mason Rudolph, and we'll have to see what really happens with there. But some of these other guys, you can make cases that they're all going to bounce back, or at least, kind of pick things up from there. Something's wrong with your Browns. I don't know what it is, but yeah. Something's up. But I'll go down here. I'll cheat a little bit. Any of those guys, lower consistency that are bounced back, I'm looking at Jamison Crowder and Robbie Anderson at 40%. Get Sam Darnold back in the mix.
Right, sure.
You have 2 games in your division with Buffalo. Or I'm sorry, Buffalo's got a good pass defense against Miami, so they have one more there and a couple of other cupcakes. So I really like the Jets going forward. So naturally, I like Crowder and Anderson to rack up some clutch games.
Yep, couldn't agree more. All right, so let's look at the tight ends. We've got about 8 minutes left. To no one's surprise, Travis Kelce right at the top, third in total points, 6 for 6, 100% healthy, 100% consistency. Evan Ingram, 100%, missed that one game last week. Hunter Henry, 2 for 2. Obviously, he's only played a couple games, but what we don't see is Ertz and Kittle at 100%, but, not too bad. They're still 83% and 80%, so no big deal there. I think all those guys were expected. I mean, we were, I was the one that was big on Ingram, got him in the 5th round. He's certainly been good for me and certainly expected to be up there, and so that's exciting. But in the 83%, actually we'll just go everything over 80. The surprises, I think the biggest surprise right now is Austin Hooper, first in total points, 83% consistent. He certainly has had his moments in the past where he's been, definitely put up some points. He's had some big games, but he's always been inconsistent. Dirk Cutter comes from Tampa Bay where he was, had a very consistent O.J. Howard. Seems like he's just brought that offense to Atlanta, and they've had to throw the ball a lot. And what do you know? Austin Hooper's now at the top of the list. So what are your thoughts on Hooper and the rest of the guys in the 80% and above range?
Yeah, Hooper's just getting peppered. You look at some of his receptions on the year. He's got 6 or more receptions in every game but 1 this season. He's got 2 out of 3 that he's gone over 100 in the past 2 weeks, so he's obviously big in there. And then in terms of just sheer fantasy points, he's got 20 or more in 3 of his last 4 games. So they're peppering him with targets, and it's one of those things where, yes, they have Julio Jones, but he commands so much attention that they take a look at some of these other guys. But other guys in the top there, it's hard not to feel good for Darren Waller after all the hard knock stuff, talking about the abuse, the drug abuse that he had for a bit and just how that really affected him, and now he got paid. So it's good to feel, it's good for him. You feel good for him. Get the money, get the consistency, and he's helping out many fantasy teams.
Gotcha. All right, so, also within that, close to that. So, the biggest difference here is when we look at tight ends, we've got this group that's all over 80%, which is great if you have one of these guys on your team. If you don't, therein lies the problem. So Will Dissly was our lifesaver and was certainly, helping all of us that picked guys like Jared Cook or Jimmy Graham or whoever you picked, Eric Ebron, and, didn't pan out for you. You picked up picked up Dissly, and you're rolling along, and then boom, Dissly now tears his Achilles and he's out for the year. there's, everybody else is basically 67% or below, or I'm sorry, 50% or below. And, so now we've got to figure out who of these guys can pick up the pace and maybe get some consistency back. Some of the guys we're used to being up there, like Delaney Walker, Jared Cook, Greg Olson, Jack Doyle, Ebron. All of these guys are just kind of floundering, trying to make, some value to them. Are any of these guys going to pick up? And don't even, we haven't even got to the guy who's dead last, who's actually above 0% consistency and is dead last, is O.J. Howard at 17%, tied with Noah Fant, Jordan Akins, and Tyler Eifert.
Oof.
Anybody there you think might kind of emerge from this group and get a little more consistency? I don't see it. If I'm going to pick anybody, I'm going to pick Delaney Walker, potentially.
Yeah, that for me, oof.
And only because Tannehill is going to be the quarterback, and he's got to have a security blanket. So I'm just going to hope that he uses Walker a little bit more. Yeah,
my only other ones that I find appealing here, I really like Dawson Knox. I think he's made enough plays to
I like him too.
Separate himself there. But then again, it's the Buffalo passing tree, which is pretty thin. But then again, they just don't throw the ball much. So hard to say there. And I'm starting to come around on Darren Fells in Houston, but I mean, it's just a low upside. All these guys are low upside plays, and you're not getting much out of them. So you got to find the guys. Honestly, maybe what I might do is look at Dallas Goedert and see if anything happens with Zach Ertz. Honestly, that might be your best bet to get a breakout guy from this list.
I still think there's potential there I think there's a little bit of potential with Ricky Seals-Jones in Cleveland. He's had some touchdowns at least, so they're definitely looking at him. He's also had some drops, and but I think there's some potential just because Njoku's out for quite a while here. So. But yeah, there's just it's kind of a hot mess there. So, it's one of those where if you don't have one of those guys, to be honest with you, I've told some people that are looking at their team and what to do with a tight end. I've asked people. I said, look at the rosters, see if somebody, there's got to be teams out there that has two good guys. Most of them are going to be somebody like Kelsey or Ertz or Kittle, and then they picked up. Darren Waller or, somebody like that, or Mark Andrews, or may even have Hooper on their team as well as a backup, and make a trade. You might have to overpay to get them. You might have to give up a good number 3 receiver or number 3 running back to help their team out because they may not have a good number 2. But if you've got the depth, you got to do it because if not, you're basically scrambling for 4 or 5 points a week, and that's just not going to cut it. And if you got some depth on your bench that you can trade off, you got to do it. You've got to go get one of these guys. And luckily, I don't have too much of that problem in most of my leagues because, like I said, I have Ingram. But I do have some that I had, Disley was saving the day for me. And, those leagues, I'm like picking up Gerald Everett and, Jason Witten and hoping that, I can hopefully get lucky some of those weeks, when they're hurt or whatever. So, all right, we got about a little under 2 minutes. Colby, thanks again for helping us out this week. Why don't you tell everybody what you're doing here and, of course, at Fantasy Alarm as well and where they can find you on Twitter.
Yep, over at Fantasy Alarm doing a lot of wide receiver stuff just for the the DFS slate and everything each week. And then obviously a Big Guy Fantasy Sports doing the Prop It Like It's Hot podcast, talking prop bets with the prop bet consistency tool, doing consistently cashing with Ron giving you those DFS and FanDuel lineups. And you can find that article each week over at BigGuyFantasySports.com. And then on Twitter, I'm at Colby R. Conway. So you can always reach out to me there, whether you want to talk props, DFS, or anything and everything in between.
Absolutely. And of course, you can find me at Bob_Lung on Twitter. Big Guy Fantasy Sports is the spot. And don't forget, Fantasy Go. Go to fantasygo.com. Check that out. As always, we are part of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. And as Colby said, every Saturday, don't forget to listen for the 2 shows, Prop It Like It's Hot and the Consistently Cashing. Yeah, easy for me to say. Those are great things, especially if you're in the DFS. I know Ron is killing it on FanDuel, and you're on DraftKings, right? I told him, I said, maybe you guys should just do those separately because he's doing really well there and not always as well with his DraftKings lineup. But you guys are still winning money for yourselves and for others out there. We appreciate that. And, of course, prop bets, make sure you check those out. We've been very doing very well this year, definitely way over 50%, probably closer to 60, maybe even a little higher, but we've definitely been doing very well with that, so make sure you check those out as well. So once again, for Colby Conway, I'm Bob Lund.